Hey guys, it's Summer Rayne from Homestead, Brooklyn, and I'm going to be talking to you about Pilea peperomioides care today. We'll go over a little bit of the history, what kind of lighting and watering regime, a little bit of the fertilizing schedule, as well as how to propagate this plant. Now, if you know anything about Pilea peperomioides, is that this was so difficult to get our hands on here in the United States for so long. It's very common in Europe. As a matter of fact, I got this plant when it was very little in the Netherlands, and I had it mailed over to me right around the time when these were going for like $60 or $70 or $80 here in the United States. In the Netherlands, these were going for like $2, $3, $4. So the demand was here, but the supply was not. But now the supply is here, and these plants I've seen for $7, $8, $9, even at my farmer's market, which you wouldn't have found that even 4 months ago. So I think now a lot of us actually have this plant. It's commonly known as a UFO plant, largely for its saucer-shaped leaves, also called Chinese money plant, and also the friendship plant, which I particularly like because it propagates itself very easily, which I'll be showing you today. And you could actually share it with friends, which is how a lot of people ended up getting their Pilea peperomioides in the first place. So firstly, let's go over just the morphology of this plant. Now, if you'll notice first, it's got these really saucer-shaped circular leaves. The other thing you'll notice, and again, probably from the species name Peperomioides, kind of sounds like Peperomia. And I think when people kind of looked at this plant, they said, oh, this leaf has this peperomia-like leaf. And I just want to give you a comparison here. So this one is Peperomia polybotrya, or raindrop peperomia. So you could see kind of like a very similar kind of leaf. And then this one is the watermelon peperomia. And you could see, again, very similar. It has this kind of peltate, which means shield-shaped or circular-shaped leaf. And if you turn on the back, you'll see that the petiole, or the stem that connects the leaf, is actually creating this kind of shield flattened shape leaf. So I just wanted to kind of pull out these peperomia just so you could see the similarities there. But something that I've never seen my Pilea peperomioides do quite yet is flower. And actually looking at the flowers could help you tell what kind of genus this plant belongs to. And believe it or not, this plant belongs to the nettle family, which is Urticaceae. So the flowers have a very urticaceous look, if that's even a word, an urticaceous flower, and that's how you could really tell and place this plant in the proper genus. Now, I've never been to the place where this plant actually grows, but it's traditionally found in the Yunnan and Sichuan provinces, which is a pretty mountainous region, if I'm not mistaken, within China. Its elevation is probably around, on average, 1,900 meters, and this is found growing in forests. But if I didn't even know any of that information of the Pilea peperomioides, what's really interesting is just how to observe what this plant looks like. If you get up really close to this plant, you'll see that it has these semi-succulent stems, and also these petioles, which have very peperomia-like look. They're semi-succulent, and it has these leaves that has this kind of waxy sheen to it. And oftentimes when you see something semi-succulent or succulent, it would tell me that this plant is really used to drying out. So if you are bringing this into your home, having it dry out between waterings is probably a good idea, because if this is growing in a mountainous area, maybe under forests, it might not be getting a tremendous amount of rainwater. You know, perhaps it's growing in some craggy substrate that the water comes, it grips onto it for a little bit, and then the water's gone. Also, what the waxiness of the leaves tell me is that maybe it tries to hold on to its water, because when there's a waxy sheen on the leaf, it prevents the moisture from transpiring too much. So generally for houseplant people, you know, giving this plant bright, somewhat indirect light, like a lot of houseplants like, is probably the best medicine. Although I've actually grown it in northeast facing windows and also about a couple feet away from my southwest facing window. One of the things to note about this plant is I'm actually showing you this, and it's very leafy on this side, but if I turn it around, you'll notice that it's not so leafy on this side. And What I actually need to do is face this side towards the window so it doesn't just all lean into one direction, because obviously the leaves are leaning towards the light. And so you just want to be mindful to actually rotate your plant in the window that you're giving it. Now, if you're giving it this bright indirect light, then you'll want to make sure that you're watering it appropriately to the light that you're giving it. If you're giving it a little bit more of an intense light, you're going to want to water it more frequently. I water mine every 3 or 4 days, and it's getting into fall right now, so this will be actually the last time I'm going to be fertilizing this plant. I fertilize it almost like once a month, and I'm using Espoma's organic indoor houseplant feed. Now, this is organic, it's not a synthetic fertilizer, so you're not going to like really overdo it, but generally you want to use 1 per quart. So if I'm just going to do a quick watering of this plant, I'll just do it relatively generously. And I'll talk a little bit more about the soil that I'm using in here, because as I had mentioned, this likes to dry out between watering. Typically you could use a standard potting mix like the Espoma potting mix, but I also like to add perlite to the mix. Now, if you've ever seen perlite, you might be like, oh, what are those little styrofoam white balls? But it's not. It's actually puffed volcanic stone, so it's really lightweight and very airy, and it's actually nice to mix in with your regular soil. Your gardening soil is fine, but if you have a tendency to overwater, it's also nice to amend it with a little bit more perlite. And I actually chat with a lot of growers and we joke, and I'm like, how much soil do you actually add to your perlite? Because a lot of growers like to add more perlite than they do soil, because it's really important for roots to have that air and not asphyxiate the roots. And the other thing you'll notice is that it's rhizomatous, so it actually spreads by underground rhizomes. When they spread by rhizomes, I always look at that as like, this is the plant's safety net. It's actually cloning itself, because if it can't find a partner in order to be able to propagate and create a new Pilea peperomioides, here's this safety net where it's actually cloning itself and spreading in this kind of understory or wherever it's actually growing. And that's why it's called a friendship plant, because they set out these little pups at the base of the stem, and these are the pups that we're actually going to be propagating and planting up elsewhere. So we're going to propagate this plant. Now, this little plant has been giving me lots of little baby pups off of it. So what you want to do is you get a sharp blade, like a knife, and what you want to do is actually cut the small baby plant as close to the mother stem as possible. It's not going to have any roots on it, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be potting it up and this plant easily roots. So I'm just going to slice it right here and get the plant off. It came off very easily, and that's what it looks like. Nothing too fancy. You could let them stay on the mother plant like I did with these, and they get almost as big as the mother plant. But otherwise, especially if you want to share something, you could just cut it off right here. It doesn't have any roots on it, but what we're going to do is I'm going to put this plant down right here, and I'm going to pot this up in this little pot right here. So what I'm going to do is actually get some of this soil, just pot that up, and just use a little bit of the perlite as well that I can mix through. And again, you don't have to use the perlite, but I always like to add just a little bit extra because it adds a little bit more aeration, particularly as these plants start to develop their roots. And then I'm also going to be using this organic biotone starter from Espoma. What I like about this is like kind of the prebiotics or probiotics that you use after you've had some antibiotics and it's killed off all that beneficial bacteria. A lot of this soil is sterile, so this has basically got helpful fungi and bacteria that you could use that helps plants, particularly when you are propagating them or potting them up, or if you want a plant to bloom. This just gives a little quick starter mix. So it kind of acts as a very light natural fertilizer. So I'm just going to mix that in with the soil. And all you need to do is put a little hole in the middle. And then I'm going to pot it up just like that. And you could also tent this up with some plastic around it and keep the humidity relatively high and put this in some indirect light. but you don't even need to do that. In many cases, I would just even pot it back up in here and it would grow surprisingly well. Sometimes these bigger guys shade it, so it's also nice to propagate these little babies up in their own separate container for a little while. Hey guys, so I hope that was very helpful in your Pilea peperomioides care. And of course, if you like these episodes, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and you can follow along on my daily journey on my blog at homesteadbrooklyn.com and on Instagram at homesteadbrooklyn. See you next week.